Hola y bienvenido a Learn Spanish en SpanishDict.com. Soy Paralee Whitmire y soy tu profesora. Hoy aprenderás de las profesiones y las preguntas como ¿qué hace tu hermano? ¿Por qué le gusta su trabajo? ¿Dónde trabajas? Y mucho más. ¡Vámonos! Enhorabuena! Ahora estás en Learn Spanish 2. Congratulations! Now you're in Learn Spanish 2. Throughout the first course, you spent a lot of time learning the basics like introductions, numbers, and a lot of time on the simple present tense. Now that you're in the second course, we're going to be getting into a lot more grammar, as well as a good bit of syntax, which is word order, and I'm going to be speaking a lot more Spanish to you, so presta atención. Like I said before, hoy aprenderás de las profesiones y las preguntas. ¿Qué significa profesiones en inglés? Professions. Y preguntas significa questions. So hoy, today, you will be learning, aprenderás de las profesiones y las preguntas. Empecemos! Now that you're in Learn Spanish 2, I think it's time you start practicing with some full sentences. Let's go ahead and start with an activity for this lesson. I'm going to ask you some questions, and all you have to do is read the answer aloud. You're going to be using the verb trabajar a lot, and it means to work. It's a regular AR verb, so you should have no trouble, and I've already conjugated it for you. But I want you to presta atención a la información, and we'll go over all the details later. ¿Listo? ¿Qué hace él? I know what you're thinking. Policía ends in an A, so that makes it feminine, right? But that was a policeman. What's going on? There are several nouns that I told you would be exceptions to this A equals feminine rule, and policía is one of them. If it were a policewoman, all you have to do is change the definite article. La policía for a policewoman and el policía for a policeman. The same works for recepcionista. It's going to end in an A whether the receptionist is a man or a woman. You just change the indefinite article. In this case, it's la recepcionista because the receptionist is a woman. Okay, más preguntas. ¿Dónde trabaja la enfermera? ¿Cuándo va a su trabajo? ¿Por qué es cocinero? Otra nota aquí. When por qué is two separate words and there's a tilde on top of the E, it means why. But when it's all smushed together and there's no tilde, then it means because. To differentiate this while you're speaking, it's all about the tone. ¿Por qué is the question. ¿Por qué means because. Más preguntas. ¿Cuánto gana el camarero cada hora? ¿Cómo es el músico? ¿Quién trabaja en el aeropuerto? ¿Es peligroso ser bombero? Vale, muchas frases, ¿no? Una cosa importante es el tilde. The tilde is a written accent and it is used in all interrogative or question words in Spanish. I mentioned this in an earlier lesson explaining the differences between ¿dónde? As a question and ¿dónde? Meaning just where. For questions that you can answer with just yes or no, you don't need an interrogative word. All you have to do is change the tone of your voice. Let's take the last question and answer set as an example. ¿Es peligroso ser bombero? Is it dangerous to be a fireman? Or if it were just a sentence, it is dangerous to be a fireman, you would say, es peligroso ser bombero. Did you hear the difference? Another thing to note about questions is that the word order is going to be a little bit different than a regular statement. Normalmente, in a statement, the subject precedes the verb, like this sentence. Antonio es mecánico. Subject, then verb. If we wanted to ask if Antonio was a mechanic, all we'd have to do is switch the subject and the verb and change the tone of the phrase. ¿Es Antonio mecánico? You use this same word order for questions with interrogative words as well. ¿Qué hace él? What does he do? ¿Qué is the interrogative word, hace is the verb, and then the subject, él. And ¿dónde trabaja ella? Question word, verb, subject. But remember, you don't need to include the subject, él or ella, unless the subject is kind of ambiguous or you're trying to point out that you're talking about him specifically or her specifically. Another thing to notice in español, and I mentioned this back in the ser versus a star lesson, is that when you're talking about professions, you do not use an indefinite article like you do in English. Remember these examples? Soy profesora de español. I am a Spanish teacher. While you say a in English, you don't say una in español. Eres estudiante. You are a student. Vale, enough of me talking. Let's practice a little bit. Pretend that you've written me a letter asking me about the professions in my family, but your questions are a little scrambled up. Using what you've just learned about word order and questions, unscramble the phrases and then say them aloud, and then I'll answer. Por ejemplo, here you can see hace, que, and tu padre. Unscramble the words so that you have a question. ¿Qué hace tu padre? Then I'll answer. Mi padre es agricultor. Simple, ¿no? Te toca. Aquí tienes es, tu madre, por qué, and vendedora. What's the question? ¿Por qué le gusta la ropa? Aquí está otra pregunta. ¿Tienes trabaja, cuándo y tu hermana? Mi hermana trabaja a las 3:30 de la tarde. Otra pregunta. Aquí tienes trabajan, tus hermanos y dónde. Tyler es marinero y trabaja en el mar. Porter es soldado y no sé dónde trabaja. Muy bien. ¿Recuerdas no sé? That's a really important phrase. It means I don't know. You'll definitely need to use this when you have to answer a whole lot of questions, right? Now, we're coming up on the end of the lesson, and there are a few more things that I want you to practice. A lot of times, when you're speaking in a new language, you have a tendency to try and translate every single word, and then you get lost in the conversation, and you don't even know what's going on. You may not even remember what the general idea was. This is especially true when it comes to questions, and interrogative words are words that you definitely need to remember really well, or you will have no idea what the person is trying to ask you. So, te toca, it's your turn. For the last activity, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I'll even provide you with part of the answer. But there's a trick involved. Por ejemplo,